Hey, Raider Nation, what's good? Jesse Merrick here. We are live with you on the Silver and Black Sports Network podcast here on YouTube. And look, the Raiders coaching search is getting real interesting. A lot has happened in the last 24 hours. Honestly, this morning, a lot has happened. And right now, this is starting to feel like it's narrowing down to two guys for the Silver and Black. But there's one major twist that could totally flip this plan upside down. We'll get into that. So today, we're breaking down who they seem to be locked in on, what the biggest threat currently is for the Raiders in this coaching search, and what plan B could actually look like if the perceived top choice says, nah, no thanks, I'm good. But first, we do want to get to the question of the day. I want to know, with the way things stand right now, who do you guys want to see the Raiders pull the trigger on for their next host, their next coach, that is? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. I will dive into my spiel, and then we'll interact. We'll get to your guys' comments, and this will be more of a Q&A after that point, okay? But first, guys, I do want to get into where things currently stand, all right? Brian Daboll and Joe Brady are seemingly off the market. The Bills just announced that they are hiring Joe Brady, who would come in for a second interview with the Raiders here in Las Vegas. So that job is off the boards, and I think that's honestly big for the Raiders because that takes a really attractive job out of the way for things and somebody that can kind of slot in. Because let's be real, what coach that's an offensive coach wouldn't want to work with a Josh Allen? Then you go look at Brian Daboll. He's not officially out of the running, but much like we saw with Mike McDaniel, he essentially has said that he's going to take the Titans head coaching job, or the offensive coordinator job, that is, if he doesn't end up getting the job as the head coach for the Las Vegas Raiders. So that leads me to believe that he doesn't really think he's going to get that. That's why he set up that contingency plan. So right now, it does feel like it is Davis Webb and Klint Kubiak. And honestly, is it in that order? I don't really know, but I think the Raiders are trying to zero in on Klint Kubiak specifically. Overall, they have interviewed 15 guys. Of those 15, I believe 10 of them are still out there and available right now, but it seems, like I said, it's down to those two guys. And now with Kubiak, it's interesting because there's not some crazy rush in order to get to him right now, because the Raiders and the Cardinals are actually the only teams that can interview him now before, at least the Super Bowl is done and all that stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens on that front. In terms of Kubiak, the big question, and this is the twist in all the things, is that it sounds like Seattle is making a full court press to go and actually keep him, okay? There's reports out there that Seattle's going all in to try and keep him there as their offensive coordinator. Then Josina Anderson has also been putting out some reports as well, saying that a top candidate may return to their club. Kind of reading between the lines, that obviously sounds like Klint Kubiak is kind of waffling on whether or not he wants to take this job. So, is this another scenario, another situation where it's kind of like Ben Johnson all over again for the Raiders? You hope that's obviously not the case if you're a Raiders fan, or myself, anybody that's covering the team. You want to see him get the best coach out there possible. So it's very interesting to see where things go. Obviously, Davis Webb already did complete his interview, his second interview with the Raiders. So he's kind of waiting around. Now, you'd imagine the Raiders are doing their digging to figure out what the deal is with Klint Kubiak. This is a guy that's obviously bounced around the last handful of years. Does he want to stay in Seattle where things are looking good? Does he not quite love the situation the Raiders are in or the Cardinals are in? I know the Browns haven't interviewed him. I think he actually denied the Browns, if I remember right. But looking around the league, the only option for him right now is the Raiders. Obviously, Tom Brady has been there, has seen it firsthand. Maybe they had a bit of a discussion after the fact. Who knows? But I bet you right now the Raiders are doing their digging to figure out, okay, what is the deal on Klint Kubiak? But I think it's very interesting that we haven't heard anything come out in regards to the Cardinals and bringing him in for a second interview either. You hear the word that they're really leaning on Mike LaFleur. So, again, what ends up happening between Davis Webb and Klint Kubiak? So I guess kind of a second question for you guys that are in here in the chat watching right now. Appreciate everybody jumping in here. Let me know who you want of those two guys, whether it's Davis Webb or Klint Kubiak. Now, I thought one thing that was really interesting, and again, I'll dive into you guys' questions in a bit here. One thing that really stood out to me, or I was looking at it, and I'm like, as I'm reading the tea leaves, seeing what's going on with Buffalo and their whole coaching situation, I thought maybe there was a world where if the Raiders did tab Davis Webb as their next head coach, then maybe, just maybe, Brian Daboll would come on as the offensive coordinator on his staff with them. I think that would be a hell of a hire for the Raiders if they could curb it that way and let Davis kind of be the guy that's attached to the hip to their quarterback, and Brian Daboll be the guy that can call the offense. We've obviously seen him have success, but that's obviously not going to come to fruition because if he doesn't end up getting the Raiders job, he's taken that job in Tennessee with the Titans on Robert Saleh's staff. Totally get that. Cam Ward, hell of a player. The big question is going to be, again, does Klint Kubiak want to come and essentially coach Fernando Mendoza? Because look, that's what's going to happen at number 1 overall, right? We all believe that. So you look and see what Kubiak did in the conference championship game. This guy was scheming it up big time. Obviously, we saw the way that they moved Jackson Smith and Jigba all around the formation, the way he put the defense in a bind. That's a really good defense, a really well-coached defense as well in there in the Rams. And there's so many breakdowns out there. Jason McCourty did a really good one on the touchdown to JSN, and how Kubiak schemed it to where, like, look, he put that entire defense in a bind and knew that JSN would come open in terms of where they were breaking on their routes late and everything like that in the thing. So it was really interesting to see how that worked out for them in that one. Like I said, that was also in a game where they had the running game taken away from them, essentially. I think they only rushed for like 75 yards. So again, guys, buckle up, because these next handful of days, hours, whatever it is, are going to be so interesting. But like I noted, there's not this like massive rush. And there is also a worry too for the Raiders. It's like, hey, maybe you decide that you want Klint Kubiak to be your guy. You can only agree in principle to it. Like, it's a handshake deal. There's nothing official at that point. So like, are you worried that maybe he would kind of leave you at the altar and dip? I mean, we've seen it happen, in the past. Who was it with the Colts? Was it McDaniels? I think did that to the Colts a handful of years ago. So you don't want the Raiders to be in a situation like that either. So it's an interesting deal to see how they're going to work things with Kubiak in his whole situation, where, again, you hear that they're trying to do whatever they can to keep him there. And also the fact that he seems to kind of be waffling. So does that maybe speed things up for the Raiders in terms of Davis Webb? But again, you better believe they're going to be doing their due diligence in that regard. Let's hop into the chat real quick here, guys. I'm seeing a lot of folks are saying that you do want Kubiak. Someone says, Couchy says Kubiak 71%. Yeah, look, Kubiak's been the front runner for this head coaching job for quite a while. I think he's the guy that they've been zeroed in on. I mean, how could you not, after, again, what he's done, 1, in the playoffs, but 2, against a really good Rams defense, and what he's just done with Sam Darnold too. I think, like, look, the hate on Sam Darnold, there's multiple ways to look at it. This is a guy that struggled to get to where he was in Minnesota and finally have success with Kevin O'Connell there. But then I believe they go 14-3. He ends up leaving, and then boom, you come to Seattle and look at the season that they've had and what he's been able to do with them. They've been an efficiency master. Let's see. I want to keep seeing here. In Klint we trust, but Davis Webb has IQ, and he loves ball. Yeah, Ricardo Barone 6779. I agree with you, man. Like, Kubiak, I think Webb is like the ultimate football guy. You know what I mean? Like, he's so young in his years. Obviously, he just turned 31. So he'd be a very young head coach taking over for the Raiders. But the thing that's interesting is, like, he's already lived a football life, like he played in college under Cliff Kingsbury, played with Patrick Mahomes in college, went and played in the NFL for a handful of years behind a lot of interesting quarterbacks around the league. Obviously played with Josh Allen, was up there in Buffalo. Buffalo actually wanted him to retire a year earlier than he did, and they wanted him on staff coaching with them. So, I mean, that tells you all you need to know about what you thought about him. But then he goes and plays another year with the Jets, retires, and then goes to Denver and interviews with them over there. And I think the thing that's really interesting is, like, you hear the stories coming out of there about Sean Payton turning the car around saying, hey, don't let that guy go anywhere else. I want him in-house. So, like, he's obviously been very impressive. I think the thing, if you go and do hire a Davis Webb, you're doing it knowing that he has the chops to develop a quarterback. The big question is going to be, how does he build out his staff? Again, he's 31. He's so young. Even though he has lived that football life, multiple football lives, really, where does he pull guys from? The one thing that I think would be interesting in all of this, and it was funny to see one of the Broncos players was asked about Vance Joseph, and his answer, like, I quote tweeted it. So if you guys want to check it out, obviously stay here on the video, but if you guys check it out, he said, I'm just happy he ... and he stops and was like, I don't want to say too much because I don't know what he's doing, or I don't know what he said. To me, I read that as Vance Joseph is very likely going back to be the Broncos defensive coordinator. But is there a world where you guys would be really interested in a Vance Joseph as a head coach and Davis Webb as the offensive coordinator? Because I don't think Vance Joseph is coming to just be the DC on Webb's staff. That, I think, just would be interesting because then you get a play caller defensively that has had a ton of success there in Denver, could build that up for the Raiders, and then you still get Davis Webb. I think that's the only way that would happen. However, again, I don't think that's going to happen. I do think that Davis Webb ends up going back to the Broncos, but just an interesting thing to think about in regards to that. Let's see. Camilo 9315 says, I don't know. I think he might stay in Seattle. He's been on 5 different teams in 5 years, and he might want stability. I agree with you, man. Like, like moving around, like we forget that there's a family component to all of these things. And at the end of the day, like, look, he could land the job in Las Vegas and get a 5 to 6 year, however long deal. And Mark Davis wants somebody to come in and, can be here for the long term. We've seen Mark give those long contracts out. Shoot, he gave Gruden 10 years. Obviously a different situation, but the stability could be there for him if he does it. Again, the big thing is you got to turn it around and create the stability for yourself. But the only thing I wonder with that is like, what's one more year in Seattle versus taking a head coaching job where you think you can lead them into the future and be their guy for the long term? So I wonder with that whole, debate. Isaiah 000 says respectfully, hell no, on Vance Joseph, LOA. Hey, look, I get it. I totally get it. I'm just throwing it out there because I think it's an interesting scenario that could play out. Like I noted, I believe it is going to be either Klint Kubiak or Davis Webb. And honestly, I'll throw this out there. If it were me, I think it's probably going to end up being Davis Webb, because where there's smoke, there's fire. You don't start hearing these reports about a coach possibly wanting to pass on the jobs if he's not really thinking about it. So I would imagine that Davis Webb ends up being the guy. But again, and I said it so many times already in this 12 minutes that we've been doing this, you have to kick the tires on him. You have to make sure that he doesn't want to be the guy, because he is the Ben Johnson of this class. Not the same guy as a Ben Johnson, but again, look what he's done up there in Seattle. Pretty good situation, though. He may want to stick around for a bit. I totally agree with that. Let's see. Let's go through the chat here. Joe Brady just signed with the Bills. Yep, that's what we were talking about. It was a very interesting one. Let's see. Contrary to what we kind of talked about here, Primatex 24/9/29 says, I would love getting Vance Joseph as a head coach. Kubiak ain't leaving. Yeah, I agree. I think it's really interesting. And yeah, people saying Kubiak's pulling a Ben Johnson. It's going to be interesting to see. Let's see. Not Now X97 says, is there any chance that we get Klint as head coach and Webb gets the OC job? Look, I don't think that's totally out of the ordinary. Now, I don't believe there's any, to my knowledge, I don't believe there is any connection between those two guys. I would imagine Davis probably wants to go back to Denver if he doesn't end up getting this head coaching job, but that would be very interesting. Let's say Kubiak takes it over and you bring Davis Webb to be your OC and coordinator, but at the same time, Davis would want to call plays, and when you bring in Kubiak, he's going to be the one that calls the plays. Otherwise, why hire Kubiak? You know what I mean? So I don't think that necessarily happens, although that would be interesting. Davis Webb's probably only leaving if he's calling plays or being the head coach. And again, in that situation where Kubiak will be taken over, that ain't happening. Someone said, send the bag to Lane Kiffin. Yeah, here I got the bag up there. Plot twist. Let's see. Ricardo Barone, 6779 says, Kubiak can see the AFC West as a challenge to hang with 3 gold jacket coaches and steps up. Hey, look, if you come into the AFC West and you beat those guys, like, and you turn things around with the Raiders, like, you are among the royalty of the NFL for doing that with some of the heavy hitting coaches that are in there. I think it's going to be real interesting, again, to see what ends up happening. Let's see. I'm going to look through the chat here. I think Webb, Tomlin, them on the first interview. Interesting. Let's see. Webb is the next John Madden. Hey, look, I can't read that name, man. You got a whole lot of things in there. You said Webb is the next John Madden. Look, the Raiders hired John when he was in his 30s. I forget exactly off the top of my head what it was. I believe he was 35 or something like that. I've been saying it from the jump. I mean, we brought on Cody Alexander and he dove into Davis Webb. The fact that this kid has grown up around the game of football. He's from Texas. His dad was a football coach in Texas for 30 plus years. I believe 36 years, 34 years, something like that. And he even, like, as a kid, he used to write his dad's plays down on the note cards before. So, like, this is a kid that's, like, grown up around it. Obviously, Texas football is different, but more like, and high school doesn't necessarily matter. But when you come up in it, like, he's been around these programs and watch them built for so long. So it's like any kid starting any sport at, like, a crazy young age, like, he's learned the game of football from the coaching side of it, from the player side of it, from all of it, from, like, such a young age. So I think it is very interesting, and he's an interesting guy for sure. Let's see. We're saying Raider Gabe 12-15. I think it's Webb and Declan Doyle as OC and possibly Raheem Morris as DC. Now, see, I think that would be really interesting, Raider Gabe. If that ended up being the case, I mean, look, Davis Webb coming in and then bringing those guys into the building would be a lot of fun. Raheem Morris, obviously a guy that's got head coaching experience. Let him just be the head coach of the defense. I would love that move for the Raiders if that ends up being the case, especially. But not now. X97 says, what kind of staff can Klint assemble? So I'm glad you asked me that because I was actually going to go to there. But when I saw the one about Davis Webb and how he could assemble a staff, that kind of caught my eye. The thing that's really interesting with Klint Kubiak is he's coming from a staff up there in Seattle that's obviously stacked in terms of what they've built and everything like that. So look at how hot this staff is and what Mike McDaniel has built. He could possibly pull some guys from the Mike McDaniel tree up there in Seattle, and that would be really big. I think it's Aiden Dirty is the defensive coordinator in name. Obviously, he's not calling the plays, but Aiden Dirty is a guy that has his name's been surfacing out there in the coaching pool early on in the process. He would be a guy that, like, hey, look, if Klint Kubiak gets the job here in Las Vegas, maybe Aiden comes down here to Vegas with him. I think that would be big because if you go and look at Seattle, so like the hot thing, we all know it is over the years, people have gone to the McVay tree and to the Shanahan tree, which hiring Kubiak would be doing that, but they're trying to get the hot offensive name and all those things. And you look in that division, well, those guys, the McVays and the Shanahans, are within the division. And if you want to build a contender, you got to start by winning your division, right? Well, what the Seahawks did is they didn't go the quote-unquote normal route, at least with their head coach, and look for the guy from that coaching tree. Instead, they found a dude from outside that coaching tree that could come in defensively and stop those offenses. Now, yes, they put up some big points against this Seattle defense, but at the end of the day, they still end up winning and coming out on top. So they went the defensive route and tried to say, hey, we're going to slow down those McVay and Shanahan offenses. So if you look around the AFC West and look at some of the offenses and the quarterbacks in this division, obviously you got Patrick Mahomes, you got Bo Nix, who has been very efficient there with Sean Payton, and then also now Mike McDaniel coming to lead, Justin Herbert as well within the division. So if you get a Klint Kubiak, you kind of hit on both fronts there, okay? You're pulling somebody from the McVay/Shanahan tree, more so the Shanahan tree, that is. And then you're also possibly getting a guy in Aiden Dirty from the Mike McDonald coaching tree that has been very successful, dating back to the Ravens, obviously, and all the success that they've had there. I think that would be a really interesting pairing, and that would be where my focus would go. If I were the Raiders and Klint Kubiak does end up being the guy, obviously Clint's going to pick his staff. John Spytek made it very clear that whoever he hires, he wants to let them be the guy. So you hire a Klint Kubiak, if it all works out that way, maybe Aiden Dirty is the dude that ends up following him coming here. And I think that would be, honestly, like if you compare those two guys together, I'd say that's a home run combo for the Raiders. The big question is, would Dirty want to leave and want to follow Kubiak? Who knows? But I think that'd be real interesting for sure. Yeah, somebody said Madden was 31. So same age as Davis Webb, which is interesting. So let's see. Yeah, man, you're thinking so long, but thank you. You said first time here. Awesome show. I appreciate you, man. I love doing the live shows. We're going to mix more of these in throughout here in the off season. Obviously, you guys know I love bringing friends onto the show, which I still will do. Maybe we'll mix a couple of them in, maybe Ryan Hogan here for a live show as well to get some real interaction with you guys. But these live ones are fun, especially when there's a lot of news going on. I love being able to jump in here and interact with you guys and answer some of questions and stuff like that. And like, again, too, just as a side, a shout out to all you guys. For those of you guys that don't know my background, I worked at NBC here in Las Vegas since 2019. I covered the Raiders in their final season in Oakland when they came here. So I was on the Raiders beat. I covered all Las Vegas sports for NBC, but I was primarily doing a lot of the Raiders coverage. I even freelanced for the Raiders, hosted their podcast with Eddie Pascal and all that stuff. And my contract was coming up. I had the opportunity to renew at NBC, but honestly, all I've ever wanted to do is talk football, talk ball. They were kind of wanting to do more storytelling and concentrate on stuff like that. And honestly, I saw an opportunity. So I was like, hey, I'm going to create the job that I want in the space that I want. So I left, and now I launched my own independent media brand here covering the Las Vegas Raiders. We are a credentialed outlet. You guys will see me down there. Whoever is named the head coach, you'll see me at the press conference. I'll be there asking questions with them. And then also during the season, for those of you guys that haven't been on board throughout the whole year, you'll see me there at Allegiant Stadium at practice, all that stuff. So we're building the brand. This is year one of building the brand. Man, we're only like 6.5 months into doing it, and it's been awesome. You guys have been so sick throughout the whole way. I mean, we topped 1 million views a while ago, and 1 million views and counting. So again, just shout out to you guys. Thank you so much for all of it. Let's see. The Space Beast. Jesse, why do you think Pelissero was saying no one was in charge in Vegas? Yeah, that whole thing is interesting. Thank you, too. This is why I love the live shows. You guys help keep me on track sometimes, too, when I forget some of the storylines that I want to get to. So that was one thing that was super interesting because, look, Mark Davis puts that statement out there after they fired Pete Carroll that it was going to be Spytek and Tom Brady leading the charge. To me, in my mind, and even when we talked to Spytek, it seemed like it was Spytek, then Brady right behind him, the two of them, in concert. And Spytek made it clear that he talks to Tom about every major decision, that's going on with the Raiders. Obviously, that includes in the coaching search. But you go and look at some of the coaches that they brought in person recently, especially Brady, when they were doing, Joe Brady, that is, when they brought him in, I believe, on Sunday when the game's going on. Tom Brady is up there up north in Seattle. So obviously, he's not there personally for everything, but Brady is involved. I do think it's interesting what Pelissero said, where he walks away. Some of these candidates have walked away wondering who's in charge. If that's the case, that is concerning for the Raiders because, again, for so long, you guys and all of us here on this show, especially with Matt Peralt, all of us have been saying either Tom has to be all in or all out, can't be like one foot in both world. And two, like there has to be a clear structure. And Spytek said the buck stops here. The buck stops with me. It needs to. Spytek needs to be the guy at the top, and Brady can be like his number two, his consigliere, the guy that he does run all those things through. But at the end of the day, John Spytek calls the shots. Regardless of the narrative that's out there, and I'm not knocking Pelissero because he is awesome at what he does. I got a lot of friends over there at NFL Network. Back in the day, I used to work over there behind the scenes before I started my on-air career. And I love all those dudes. They obviously do great work. They are true NFL insiders, have been doing this way longer than I have. I just don't know if that's necessarily the case. In my mind, from what I see from being there every day, I do believe that it's Brady, I just contradicted myself. I do believe that it's Spytek, then Brady, but I could see where there's some confusion involved because Brady's sitting in on things and stuff like that. I can tell you this, that I just saw someone said, glad you left fake news NBC. Come on, man. Locally here in Las Vegas, News 3 was awesome. No fake news over there at Channel 3. I love my guy, Brian Salmon. I love all the folks over there at Channel 3. We left amicably. Actually, when they fired Pete Carroll, I was hopping on their morning show, breaking it down. But that was funny. I'll give you that one, man. So back on track here with this one. Again, Spytek needs to be the guy that's the tip of the spear, and I do think that is ultimately the case. I think Brady obviously offers his input, and he is financially invested and very involved. But at the end of the day, Mark Davis is a guy that wants to be hands-off. There's a narrative out there that, like, he meddles in things and all this stuff, and I know you guys have a rocky relationship with him at times, but Mark Davis is a guy that wants to bring somebody in and let them make the decisions. Like, he doesn't want to meddle in the coaching search or any of those types of things. You see it with John Gruden. He tried to give him that 10-year deal, and he was like, hey, you go run this thing, make the Raiders great again. And then also now you go and look at it even on the Aces side of things, the Las Vegas Aces. He hires Becky Hammon and essentially gives her the whole run of show with things. So that's what he wants to do. That's what he's tried to do multiple times, throughout. I think this is the time where, look, they're going to really try and bring somebody in. Like Spytek said, they know they have a mountain to climb. They don't want to climb it in a day. They're going to take their time and really do this one right. So this is going to be so interesting to see who does, take over as the head coach. And I see someone said Mark Davis's record as the Raiders owner speaks for itself. Maybe he should have learned the trade from his dad instead of being a goof. Well, hey, look, that's Mark, I want to say this. Mark has been nothing but kind to me anytime we have talked to him. I get it. You guys are frustrated with him at times and stuff like that. But I would say, trust that he's letting the guys that are in charge handle things. Has he made the best coaching decisions over the years? Definitely not. And those guys have failed you guys as Raiders fans. But Mark has tried to get it right. Again, we'll see what happens with that. But we're going to move on from that one. Let's see. I'm going to try and pull through some of the comments on here, guys. Let's see. Camilo 9315 says, one thing I haven't heard anything about is our DC. Any word on Morris or his other candidates that you would like? Yeah, I kind of touched on that earlier there, just to the simple fact of if Kubiak comes in, Aiden Dirty would be real interesting. Again, if they go the route of Davis Webb, maybe Raheem Morris comes in. We'll just have to kind of wait and see. But that process starts all over again for the Raiders when they hire their head coach. The guys that they actually interviewed already, they can't just be slotted in as a DC or an OC or anything like that. So when a head coach is hired, they have to restart the whole process again, and they do have to satisfy the Rooney Rule as well. So it's going to be a process to figure out who their OC and their DC is and how the rest of the staff is built out. But that is going to be a really exciting time to see how things pan out for this team, because honestly, like, we're just projecting and guessing right now on to see like what things are going to look like for the Raiders going forward. Once they hire a coach, offensive, defensive, whatever it is, when they hire a staff, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, all those things, like, that's when my job really gets fun, and when we can have a lot of fun here going back and forth, guys, because then we can really start to dive in the weeds and look at these coaches' backgrounds and look at the players that are out there in free agency, in the draft, and all those things, and see how they might want to bring them into the fold and what they would want to do there. Let's see. With Klint, we can bring in Kenneth Walker or Shaheed in free agency. Yeah, hey, that would be really interesting if that's the case. With that kind of in mind, I just want to dive into my take real quick here on whether it's Klint Kubiak or Davis Webb and how they could possibly change the team. And there's a lot more, interesting things that are, hey, shout out to Box State Raider for the super chat there, $5. Have the Raiders schedule another interview with Kubiak. Yeah, hey, we're still waiting on that front. And I honestly, I think that's where they're kicking the tires to figure out, like, is this thing for real? I don't have official word on that yet. I'm not going to try and front like I do. So that's the thing that is going to be interesting. But the Raiders are, I will say, in the driver's seat on Kubiak. It seems like it's Kubiak's job to lose. So stay tuned on that front, guys, because it is going to get very interesting to see where things go next for them in that regard. I'm just checking, Twitter as well as we're doing this to make sure I'm not missing anything. But what I wanted to get into as well was talking about if these guys are hired. So if a Klint Kubiak is hired, first and foremost, you better believe he is going to invest heavily in that offensive line, because look, the Kubiak scheme and Klint Kubiak in general, they want to run the football. They ran the football at the 4th highest clip in the NFL this year. That is their aim. So they would be building up the trenches big time. Now, having said that, no matter who the head coach is, I think that's going to be the case. They're going to invest in the offensive line. But again, if Kubiak comes in, you better believe that they are going to be investing heavily in the offensive line in the draft and throughout free agency. And also, we're going to see 12 personnel continue to be used at a high clip, okay? Up there in Seattle, what the Seahawks did with Klint Kubiak in charge, they ran 12 personnel at the 12th highest clip in the league. So this is a guy that knows how to use his tight ends, and he would be upgrading big time with Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers and how he'd be able to use those guys. And one thing that struck me as I was watching the NFC Championship game, the way that he was moving Jackson Smith-Njigba around, and yes, Jackson Smith-Njigba and Brock Bowers are two different guys, but Brock is obviously receiving threat number one in this offense. I just couldn't help but sit back and think, like, man, how would a Kubiak use Brock Bowers and move him around and play that Where's Waldo game? It would look, I think, a lot more like we saw from Brock in college at Georgia when they moved him around all over the formation. We saw it sometimes here and there with the Raiders over the years since he's been, in the silver and black. But I think, like, we'd see Brock line up outside, in the slot, in the traditional inline tight end. We'd see him at fullback. We'd see him at running back. He would be all over the place. And I think that would be a lot of fun to watch, Kubiak, and how he would use Brock Bowers. But then the interesting element in that whole deal, again, is a Michael Mayer, who doesn't get enough credit, in my mind, honestly, for being a solid receiving threat and just solid tight end around the league. So if Kubiak comes in here, again, having run 12 personnel at, I believe, the 12th highest clip in the league up there in Seattle, you better believe that they're going to be running it a lot more. And we even heard from Greg Olson as well, who became the interim offensive coordinator for the Raiders, say that he thinks there's still some meat on the bone, that they could run 12 personnel at an even higher clip, which is saying a lot because the Raiders were up there. I forget exactly where, but they were in the top 5 of teams running 12 personnel this season. And then again, another thing to keep an eye on, if Kubiak does end up coming to Vegas and taking over as the head coach, you better believe that he is going to go and try and figure out a way to bring in a JSN type player, whether that's in free agency, in the draft, whatever the heck it is. Those guys obviously don't just grow on trees, but he would need a guy like that, because look at what they have offensively up there in Seattle. They've got Jackson Smith-Njigba and Cooper Kupp. You got to find some guys like that. Coming out, I heard some people try and compare Jack Best to like a Cooper Kupp or a Puka Nacua type player. Does he possibly try and use him in that way? It's going to be interesting to see, how he would be used. And we still need to see a lot more from Jack Besh. This was a tough season to evaluate a lot of these guys because of how late in the season they were used, how they were used, how disjointed things were for the Raiders. But he's an interesting piece to keep an eye on given the way things were run up there. But the Raiders obviously need a number one receiver, pure receiver threat in that regard as well. And so now let's talk about Davis Webb and how things could look as well with him if the Raiders do go that route and bring him in. Well, you go and look in Denver, their offense is built on trying to be as efficient as possible. They're going to try and run the football. They didn't have the most success this year, but they had a really good offensive line, one of the better O-lines in the NFL. So again, Davis Webb would come in. You better believe they're going to address a lot of the stuff up front on that offensive line. The big question is, what is his scheme actually going to look like? Would it be a Sean Payton-esque scheme? Would it be more like what we saw in Buffalo? Like, that's kind of interesting. He also comes from the Cliff Kingsbury tree too, which is another interesting deal because it could have some air raid mixed in. There's so many different influences on what his coaching could possibly be here in Las Vegas. And that's something that I think would be interesting because like when you look at Davis Webb, he could almost get a jump on the other teams in the league because nobody would know quite what to expect. It could take him a while to catch up with them. And I know this is a sore subject to talk about Chip Kelly, but look at his first stint in Philadelphia. He got a jump on the league because he was running some interesting things there and doing something the league hadn't quite seen. Maybe Davis Webb does something like that. But also, too, with Cliff Kingsbury in mind, he has been very complimentary of Davis Webb. I heard Jordan Schultz relay a quote that I couldn't find, but I heard him relay a quote about Davis Webb saying that Cliff Kingsbury said if he had a son who played quarterback, he'd want him to play for Davis Webb. Now, that's saying a lot coming from a guy like Cliff Kingsbury because, let's be real, Kingsbury knows quarterbacks. Obviously, Coach Patrick Mahomes in college, Kyler Murray and Jaden Daniels, both winning rookie of the year, that is offensive rookie of the year, under his tutelage. So this is a guy that knows quarterbacks. He says that he wants his son, if he plays quarterback, to play for Davis Webb. That's interesting. Now, the big question would be, if Davis Webb takes over, does Klint Kubiak possibly come here? I've heard some people say they don't really quite feel like the two would be a fit on the same staff. I don't know, but given their history, they've got a relationship. I think that'd be fun to watch. But Klint, again, probably wants to call plays. If you bring in Davis Webb, I'd imagine he wants to call plays. He's only called plays once in his career, to my knowledge, and that was in the preseason, I believe, against the Arizona Cardinals. So, again, who knows? It's the preseason. You don't quite know what it would look like. Let's see. User DN, there's a lot of numbers in there, so I'm going to skip trying to read your name out. You said Kingsbury, the guy who agreed to be our OC and then blew us off. We want that guy now. Hey, look, I think that was honestly more Cliff Kingsbury from my read on the situation. The folks I've talked to is Kingsbury actually wanted an extra year on the contract, and the Raiders wouldn't give it to him. So he left, and he was the one that was mad. So, again, maybe let bygones be bygones on that front. And Cliff, if you can get Davis Webb and Cliff Kingsbury on the same staff, like those are two great offensive minds. Like I said, don't necessarily think that happens, but it could be interesting for sure. Let's see. Looking through the chat here. Kubiak and let's see. To quote Bob Marley, if you don't know your past, you don't know your future. Hey, look, I think it's important to know Raiders history and all that stuff. I see some folks are probably fighting here in the comments. Keep the fighting to a minimum, guys. Let's keep it cool. All right. This is usually a fun chat back and forth. Let's see. How about Davis Webb and then poach Jim Leonard for DC from Denver as well? Yeah, look, I think that'd be interesting too. You would love to get somebody from the same coaching tree that he's got there in Denver, and maybe they pull some things that Vance Joseph has done from that defense. Because when we were talking with Cody Alexander, he noted that the stuff that Vance Joseph has done there, I mean, man, it's so interesting watching it because he's mixed kind of the Wade Phillips aggressiveness with some of the structure of a Vic Fangio defense. So those two things put together, if you could pull somebody from their staff like that to come in and join them here in Las Vegas, that would be fun to watch. And again, like I said, you got to start, if you want to build a contender, which the Raiders are a long way from, but if you want to build a contender, you have to start by winning in your division. And you have a lot of really good offenses that you're going to have to be able to slow down. I know the Chiefs fell off last year, but look, they've got Eric Bieniemy coming back. You believe that they're probably going to revert back to being more similar to what they've been over the last handful of years. You can't rely on just 1 year. So you're going to need a really good defensive coordinator. That is going to be a massive hire. Obviously, it is head coach, because right now the way things are going, it looks like they're going to get an offensive-minded head coach there. So that's already kind of checks two boxes off because you get an offensive guy to be able to pair with a young quarterback in Fernando Mendoza. the next most important hire on this Raiders staff is going to be defensive coordinator. And again, that's going to be fascinating. And when that happens, we're going to bring Cody Alexander on to break down what the scheme could possibly be like, all those different things. Because you guys know, and the folks that have been watching the show, you guys know that Cody Alexander is the man. Let's see. Kirk. You said, hey, wait, you're Jesse Merrick. I hear you're on the morning tailgate. Yeah. I hop on the morning tailgate with Clay and Vinny and Vince, from time to time. Every couple of weeks, we jump on the show and kind of break things down. So, yeah, you guys will hear me on Raider Nation Radio from time to time as well. I love those guys. I used to do a regular spot with them, and we've since kind of mixed in a little bit more. Also, you'll hear me from time to time, too, on JT the Brick Show. And then also, too, if you guys are local here in Las Vegas, or if you want to pop on and listen to ESPN Radio here in Las Vegas in the evenings, Cofield and Company, I do a regular spot on Mondays on his show as well, breaking down the Raiders. Let's see. Kushmob 4208. I love being in the YouTube space because I'm reading some funny ass names as we go through this thing. Stuff I would have never done when I was on TV at NBC. He said, Jesse, don't you think there's a chance for Kubiak head coach and Webb OC? I think Spy wants Webb head coach and 12 wants Kubiak because Kubiak head coach, but we got Kubiak. So I addressed that earlier. I don't think there's any chance that we see Kubiak and Webb come on staff. I'll rehash it, and sorry for the folks that are watching this after the fact as a true show rather than the live show. I just don't think that happens because Davis Webb very likely wants to call plays. If you hire Klint Kubiak, he is going to be your play caller. That's why you bring him in-house. Let's see. Grant Udinski could be a wild card at this point. Yeah, so Udinski actually got a pay raise to stay with Jacksonville if he doesn't end up getting a head coaching job. I think all signs point to Udinski going back there. I believe he's interviewed now twice. I could be wrong because I haven't been following him super closely, but I believe he's interviewed twice with the Browns. And it sounds like if he doesn't get the Browns job, that he's going back. But Udinski was a guy, after talking with Ryan Hogue, the quote that he relayed about Udinski from Kevin O'Connell was that interviewing Udinski was like talking to a guy who could build a car from scratch for a job at a car wash. So, like, dude, super overqualified. I think it's interesting for sure. So I wish the Raiders would have considered him more. I would have liked to see how he factored into things. Obviously, they probably did their due diligence on him. And you look at Jacksonville, and a lot of that success is probably related to Liam Cohen. Probably still need to see more from him. Hey, I do want to make sure I address this one. And shout out to Rankster. God, man, you got so many letters in there. It's tough reading it there, but you said subscribe. So thank you for subscribing. I appreciate that, man. From Chili Hay 13, Jesse, please remove Grandpa Pete from your intro. Hey, look, that is on the to-do list. Even though the season's done, running a business is hard. First-time business owner here in the entrepreneur space. I got a lot on my plate that I'm trying to figure out behind the scenes first. But one thing I do need to do is remove both Pete and Geno Smith from the intro. That is happening. You obviously have been watching a lot of the shows because the intro wasn't on this live show. So one, I appreciate you for watching. But two, that's going to be coming. We're going to rework the intro in a bit here. But bear with me while I take care of some other things, as there's so many moving parts going on, around the Raiders right now. Let's see. Renee Garcia says, what about Daboll as head coach and McDermott as DC? Great package. No, hey, look, that would be really interesting. And I know, so like we kind of talked about the fact that they seem to be zeroing in on Klint Kubiak and Davis Webb. We are forgetting the fact that there was the caveat thrown in there about Brian Daboll taking the job in Tennessee as the Titans OC, with the caveat that that's if he doesn't get the Raiders head coaching cert. So I'd imagine they probably told him, like, hey, maybe you're in our top three. So I think that's a realistic thing. The thing that's surprising to me with Daboll is that he's going to Tennessee versus up there in Buffalo. And I understand he and Brady were up there at different times in Buffalo, Joe Brady, that is. So, but like Daboll went to high school 11 minutes from the Bills stadium. There's so many ties up there. I'm just surprised that didn't quite happen, with the way it all worked out. But Daboll, and let me go back to your question there. Yeah, Daboll is head coach and McDermott is DC. I think that would be a very interesting package for sure. McDermott, obviously a really good head coach that, like, yes, he couldn't quite get over the hump and win the Super Bowl and all those different things. And the one year that they did have the opportunity without, a Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, all those guys in the playoffs, they couldn't get over the hump. But man, as a pure DC, I think it'd be really interesting. I'm not super tapped in on McDermott scheme-wise, all those different things in his full background. But look, on name alone, like he's a hell of a head coach and would be very interesting to see him come in as a DC. I think a lot of those guys that were former head coaches that come in and just take over as a coordinator are always so interesting because it's like your world goes from like, you have to do a million different things to just one thing. Look at Josh McDaniels, for instance, which I know is a sore subject for Raiders fans, but being just an OC, look at what he's done up there in New England and his past as well when he's been just a play caller. So a lot of things can happen for these dudes when it would be interesting. A lot of things can happen for these guys when they go from being a head coach to just having to worry about one side of the ball and you be the CEO of the defense or whatever it is. TNVG238 said, Jesse, how often do you go live? This is kind of a new thing for me doing the lives. So as an aside for the folks that didn't catch the last live we did, I tried it in the season opener when I was out there in New England, and I recorded the entire podcast. I was live on YouTube and also on Twitter, but I didn't turn my freaking mic on. So I tried to go. So I had to reshoot the entire podcast once I realized that. And I didn't have access to the chat or any of those things the way I was doing it. So I didn't notice it till it was already done. So obviously I was pretty pissed off when that happened. So I had to go back and shoot the entire podcast over again. I was a little scared to try the lives again after that because I didn't want to screw anything up. But I did a live after the national championship game through the software that I usually record on. Now this one is natively here through YouTube. So again, I'll be doing this more often. Like I said, I'm going to sprinkle more of these lives in here throughout the off season. And obviously next year, the goal, the goal, fingers crossed, is to do a live show after every game, whether I'm on the road with them, which I'm hoping to be on the road for every game next season. But when I'm at Allegiant Stadium, the goal is to do a live show after we're done in the locker room every time. Now that I got this thing working, the big question is just honestly, the Wi-Fi down there at Allegiant sometimes can get a little bit tricky. So, bear with me. But yeah, here in the off season, I'm going to mix in more of these. Maybe I'll go live like once every 2 weeks. Honestly, it might become a weekly thing too. One thing I'm open to is maybe talking with you guys about seeing what works best for you guys. I like this 10 o'clock time. This works really well for me in my life and what I got going on. And obviously, like, look, we've got over 329 people in here on the live. So I would love to continue doing it. And one thing too, yeah, Bobby Simpson 9987 says, we'll miss PG, Patrick Graham. I agree 100%. But I think it's honestly a great move and a great time for Patrick Graham to be able to go and get a fresh start somewhere else. I think Patrick Graham is a really good defensive coordinator. It's just he kind of had a raw deal with all the turnover and all that stuff. He stuck around. Obviously, he's a good coach because so many of these coaches that came through kept him on staff. I think it's going to help PG to get a fresh start somewhere else. It's going to be one of those deals where, you guys will probably see, he's going to resurface on some team out there. And he's going to have a lot of success, I think, as a defensive coordinator. It just didn't work out here. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm seeing Pigs. What? Yeah. Pigs 76 says, should have been Minter, but I think Webb makes some sense. Football is fundamentally a relationship business, and Webb has proven ability to develop trust with some of the NFL's best talents. That is a great take on the Webb front for sure. Yes, he may be young. He's only 31 years old. We don't know how well he can build out a staff, but there's one thing that's for sure. That kid has built up some very strong relationships around the NFL because when his name was thrust out there into the coaching world, as these interviews first started, you heard so many people come and back him up from all walks of life in the NFL coaching world. So this is a guy that obviously is very tapped in, throughout things, for the Raiders or for the NFL, that is, sorry. He's a guy that I think, again, you lean on those relationships. He's got a lot of people that trust him, that think he's ready to roll. Otherwise, you wouldn't skyrocket to the top of some of these lists or even be this deep into the interview process. So yes, that would definitely help him. The thing you did note there on Jesse Minter, honestly, I think the Raiders, from what I had heard there, some of the reports and all those things, that like the Raiders tried really hard with Jesse Minter. As soon as that Ravens job came open, he seemed like a shoo-in for that job. I, as a guy that covers the team, would have loved to see Jesse Minter stick around in the division and be the head coach for the Las Vegas Raiders and then find, a coach on that side offensively to lead things. But I do think it makes sense. I've been saying it from the get-go. I think it makes sense to go the offensive route and pair them, with a quarterback in Fernando Mendoza. But Minter would have been a really, really interesting one because one, he's got the book obviously on the division and had some success here within the division with what they did defensively and is running a modern NFL defense. Now he's going to go there in Baltimore, and I think he's going to have a lot of success there. That guy knows how to build a program. He comes from that Mike McDaniel / Harbaugh tree, learning from both of them as well. So that guy is a dude that I think is going to be a hit for them for sure. The Raiders, again, have to hit on him. I touched on this real quick, but I do want to get to Steve Price here. You said, would Davis Webb bring over Vance Joseph for DC? I don't think he's leaving Denver, where he is the DC, where he's got that defense built up, where he could possibly even take over from Sean Payton at some point later on down the road to come in and try and rebuild things on defense for the Raiders as they're currently constructed. That's just a job that I don't think makes sense. It would be less than a lateral move. It'd be a step back for him. So I don't think that ends up happening. Let's see. Has Brady been able to talk to Kubiak like we all think? Isn't he not allowed in the pregame meetings and whatnot? Yeah. So because of his whole like status with, the Raiders and all those things, there's all those rules and regulations. Like he doesn't have those same meetings with a lot of them, but you better believe he's talked to him at some point. I'm sure like he can still have those conversations. He's just not allowed in those meetings and all that stuff. I'm sure there was some sort of like impromptu. This is not me reporting anything. I'm just saying, I'm sure there was some sort of meeting of the minds there up there in Seattle after that game. Brady was up there. It'd be crazy not to at least talk to him and chat with him. He was all over him up there in Seattle, talking about how impressive he was in that game. Let's see. We're going to wrap this up pretty soon here, guys, but I want to get to a few of these as well. Long Raider Night. Look, man, you've been in all of the videos lately and commenting a ton. I appreciate you. You said, why is nobody talking about Cam Turner, Indy QB coach and play designer? Indy was doing great this year until they lost Jones. We're the best offense in the league. Yeah, hey, no, I agree 100%. I'm not super tapped in on Cam Turner. I'll be completely honest. I got to do more of my research on him, but looking at what Indy was this year with Daniel Jones, I mean, look, that's a guy that was much maligned around the league that I don't think many teams and many people would be like, oh, yeah, we got to get, Daniel Jones in here to be our quarterback. Like they had a lot of success there with them. Maybe he's a dude that comes in, and is in the mix there. Again, I just don't know the ties with Davis Webb or any of those things. There's so many things you have to figure out because, again, like when you guys said earlier there, it's one of those deals where it is a relationship business. So you go and you look at the ties that they all have and stuff like that. But man, anybody that did what they did up there in Indy is going to be interesting. Let's see. All right. I will close with this one, guys. And it is Richard Hardy, 6257. Jesse, what's the gut feeling about who it will be? All right, guys, this is my take on how things actually end up panning out for the Raiders in their coaching search. One hell of a way to close out the show, right? My gut feeling tells me that it's going to be Davis Webb. I talked about it a little bit earlier. I think it's interesting because you don't hear this stuff about a coach possibly wavering about the jobs that are out there or wanting to stick around and all those things like we've heard with Kubiak, unless there's some real truth to some of those things. Where there's smoke, there's fire, So I get the feeling, my gut tells me that Kubiak is going to pull a Ben Johnson and bow out on this coaching search. Otherwise, I think we would have heard more at this point. But look, things could change. He could be coming in for an interview, all those things. Like this stuff changes so fast. And that's why I wanted to do this show live so that we could get kind of a live breakdown on things. And I may be jumping on here again very soon to break down Klint Kubiak as the next Raiders head coach. Who knows? You know what I mean? But my gut tells me that Kubiak's going to end up staying up there in Seattle. And I think Davis Webb will end up being the guy. And that's the one that, again, we've been talking about from the jump. I think it'd be really interesting to bring a guy like him in, and I will dive into it deeper when an actual coach is announced for the Raiders. But with Webb, I think what you could do is that with Davis Webb, you bring him in. Maybe he's not ready to be like the guy right now, but the Raiders aren't ready to win right now either. They've said that there's a mountain in front of them and they're not looking to climb it in one day. Well, hey, look, you bring him in, you bring Fernando Mendoza in, the two of them can grow as this roster grows and learn and build together. And then boom, maybe in 2-3 years, Davis Webb is cooking. In 3 years, he's rose through the ranks and already getting head coaching jobs, head coaching interviews, that is. So who knows what the learning curve would be like for him. I think if Davis Webb is indeed hired, again, he's 31 years old, give him some grace this season, next season, and let him learn and grow into that role as a play caller, as a man leading the charge, all those different things, because it will be a learning experience. There'll be some growing pains. But I think you guys would be on board with that and would be willing to be a little bit patient because there would finally be a head coach, a young guy, offensive-minded guy, and a quarterback, young quarterback in Fernando Mendoza, that for the foreseeable future, there could be like a light at the end of the tunnel if that ends up being the case for a lot of you guys. So anyway, guys, look, I appreciate you hopping on. This has been a lot of fun. Like I said, we're going to do more of these lives moving forward. I will try to announce them as much as I humanly possibly can anytime I'm considered doing them. But like I said, this was awesome. I love doing the live shows with you guys. And next time we will see you, at least according to our plan, our normal schedule of shows. We'll be seeing you on Thursday at 9 a.m. But if something does change, I'll jump on here, do a reaction podcast. If I'm around the studio, obviously I'll be doing that live. The goal is to do a live reaction show based on when that happens. But shout out to all you guys in the comments. This has been a lot of fun. I love doing the live element because it ties me back into my career as a TV reporter and all that stuff. Like, there's nothing like going live. And then getting the real interaction with you guys is so much fun. We had over 330 people, I think, at one point here in the live shows. So that's a lot of fun. And we're going to continue to, do all this stuff. So are you going to do the draft here? I'll close out on this one. I'm actually going to be down at the Raiders facility for the draft, trying to figure out how I'm going to work the show around that. But I'll be giving you guys live reaction in some form, whether that's on social or whatever it is, or after the first pick, each pick, all those different things. I'm going to formulate a draft show pretty soon here. But again, shout out to all you guys. You guys are awesome. I'm stoked we could do this. I'm stoked it worked out too, given all the news that was going on leading up to us going live. Makes for a really fun show with a lot going on. But anyway, guys, as always, thank you so much for checking us out. If you've made it this far, for the 283 of you that are still here, if you haven't already subscribed, to our channel here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Also smash the bell icon as well. And also, too, go on and check us out online at silverandblacksportsnetwork.com and subscribe to our free Raiders newsletter. Again, it's free 99. Like, there's no better deal in sports. Go to silverandblacksportsnetwork.com, subscribe to that free Raiders newsletter. It drops in the offseason here every Friday morning, and it's chock full of a lot of my takes, my insight, my analysis, all those different things on the Raiders. It's a one-stop shop for all of that and more. But anyway, guys, I am going to get out of here. Otherwise, I'm going to keep playing this game and keep answering your questions because I love doing this with you guys. But we will structure this more and fit in more of these live shows as the weeks go on. So have a great rest of your Tuesday, guys. I'm sure I will be seeing you very, very soon as things move quickly here with the Raiders coaching search. Have a good one, guys.